Hey everybody, how's it going? Don't answer that, it's a rhetorical question. It's an absolute pleasure for me to introduce Rebecca Méndez, whose work goes from professional design on a large scale to intimate objects, nature-based media installation, and work in traditional film to murals. Born in Mexico with degrees across design and fine art, Rebecca teaches at UCLA, also on a range of topics from branding and vision to community arts and new media. She also has really awesome hair and super cool glasses. More importantly, her work is, in a word, relevant. In an age of the Anthropocene, and for those who don't know that term, it means that human activity has more impact on the Earth than any other of the Earth's inhabitants. It is more and more important to rethink technologies and our relation to nature, to media, to our environments, and habitats, both physical and virtual. And Rebecca's work challenges our conceptions of ourselves in and with the world, gifting us often with think spaces that are both mediated and immediate. I look forward to hearing more about them while also being enthralled by her hair and her glasses. Rebecca Méndez, ladies and gentlemen.
She does have really cool hair, glasses.
All right. Can you hear me well? Okay, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me, Nathaniel, and everybody else that were in cahoots. I know decode is important here as well, so thank you so much. All right, so one of the things that I want to just kind of give you a sense of, even just the way that I structure my practice, is that I have found that the combination of my design studio that I have with my husband for already over 20 years is sometimes the one that it kind of focuses primarily in brand and brand identity and anything that has to do with graphic design. But at the same time, it has grown so much into now a lot more public art. So then the art practice has, whereas I had it very, very divided, the art practice, the design practice, the teaching is now all really beginning to integrate in a very, very exciting way, in which I don't have to spend any energy trying to separate them. On the other hand, projects that now have to do with teaching, I'm designing all kinds of things that have to do with the way that the artwork needs to be expressed into the world, and therefore utilizing all of my might as a graphic designer, as a visual person in any possible way, and then the artwork itself then ends up being much more comprehensive. And I think that in many ways begins to be much more part of what I'm calling the fieldwork practice, and maybe you guys know about the fieldwork practice. I will speak a little bit about that in detail. So the one other thing that I added to the pile of things, as if I had not enough, is the Counterforce Lab. And the Counterforce Lab is a response specifically to this urgency to be able to then all of these parts that I have now developed individually, how then they have much more of a purpose. I definitely am dedicating the rest of my life to make sure that I contribute to, honestly, it might sound cheesy as hell, but saving the planet. Although I think that the best way that I have heard of saving the planet was a ridiculous bumper sticker that says, "Save the world, kill yourself." Yeah. So I think that let's hope we don't get there. But and I have to say that I was very, very inspired with reading These Changes Everything by Naomi Klein. She was the one who definitely propelled me to open the center and then have much more of a focus. So anyway, the nature of matter. Throughout the presentation, I will share some autobiographical data or experiences that continue to influence my life. and influence the direction that my work takes. I was born and raised in Mexico City, where both my parents are chemical engineers, or were chemical engineers by training. Almost every question I asked, no matter how mundane it was, they would take out the organic tone of chemistry and the inorganic chemistry tone. And so the banality of anything, it just had to be responded in the way in which, in a biochemical answer. And it is inevitable that as I go through, you'll see my work, that is this physical-chemical point of view is very strong. They instilled in me the love of the natural world, but most importantly, the nature of matter, its composition, organization, its behavior, cycles and systems, and specifically the forces and cross-rhythmic tensions that make natural phenomena emerge. But most importantly, this mindset fostered not just a sense of self-identity, but primarily a sense of self in relation to other animals, including humans, and environments, trees, mountains, plants, even cinder blocks, and I will talk at the end a little bit of how my practice is moving a little bit more to the idea of vibrant matter, and that means it is going to the post-humanist world, or time. Oh, that was supposed to actually move. Anyway, this is a video, and it's good maybe that it doesn't move yet, because I have so much work to show you that maybe some of the videos is good that they don't work. But this is something that, let me just see here. In this series is called At Any Given Moment, and it was the idea of being able to think of the organization of a very simple element, a blade of grass, water, so that I could see that through different ways in which light acts on it, gravity, all the forces in nature act in it, then it gives incredible difference. And that the difference in the world is not so much about a very complex equation, but it's much more something very small but set in complex organization. This is the way that some of these installations get exhibited. The idea for me is to be able to create a space where you enter, and it's immersive to an extent that you then begin to perhaps see yourself in a different scale in relation to these rhythms that, sometimes we have much more of a distance relationship. So this immersive aspect is important to the work. So again, this series explores issues of perception, specifically our relationship to the technologically mediated nature. During the time, I was commissioned by Tom Main to do a different kind of project, and he was reading Darcy Thompson on Form and Growth, in which he was talking about the idea that everything in the world must respond to some kind of engineering, an equation. And he was looking for the unity of form and function. But I will not get into too much detail on that. You will actually see it. So this is, at any given moment, it has sound, but I'm not getting the sound here. Anyway, he's kind of like his search about that unifying form in nature. And it's coming, it's likely coming. It is very, when you are in the installation, it really, your belly reverberates. It's just as soon as you look at this, it's not so much about addressing the visual, but also addressing everything around you. I have sometimes like 3 tons of lava rock in front of this installation, so that it moves to try to activate all of your senses. So this is an example of how this has been exhibited. And this I call is At Any Given Moment fall exists only as a video piece, but also exists with a volcanic rock. Single channel video installation. It's about 22 feet by 19 feet, the projection. The sound is composed by Drew Schnur. I like working with composers. I like that collaboration. It's just fascinating to try to express what you're looking for in terms of an experience, so that they are able to then bring that to the work. I know that the other part that I was reading at the time was A New Kind of Science by Stephen Wolfram, that to me was very interesting, that he takes this idea of Darcy Thompson, but to the digital age, unleashing cellular automata. And so this idea of these kind of computational self-reproducing software program, and I'd love to talk to you more about that. I'm pretty sure you have thoughts on that. I could learn a lot from that. Setting these mathematical rule sets, that is really, really interesting. And for me, it's not that I'm able to set them myself by computation, but what I love is seeing them in nature and contemplating and recognizing this patterning and these systems. I am definitely in that sense much more of a documentarian. I just love observing them in nature. And I have a kind of like a co-author in there. There's something that really, right?
Yeah.
So just imagine that he's just definitely like getting all the vibes firsthand.
Lucky bug.
So the idea of, again, these cross-rhythmic tensions between simple elements, a blade of grass modulated by variable speed and variable light conditions, creates visual difference and reveals the patterns that one simple element produces through relationships and complex organization. The large-scale projection with its engulfing force and meditative recurring cycles enters in relation with our own human rhythms, resulting in a seeming mutual modulation. And these ones are set in continuous loop, and they are installed in, again, just an immersive space. In this case, it was in Pasadena, the Williamson Gallery, where Buckley Canyon had just burned. So then it made sense to me to bring something of its material, but that as I brought it in a different condition, the carbon made a very interesting smell, and it absorbed the humidity of the space. So did the lava. So I had the lava rock, and then so the water, lava rock, and then this one. And just thinking in terms of perhaps another moment of that same element. And it's interesting to kind of note that in this work, I don't do coloration of the work, but when I see something like this one, the greens, the reds, all of those different colors were happening because of different types of growth of the grass. When I am in the field observing, waiting for the moment when the weather alters the moment, sometimes the waiting could be 3 hours, 3 days, I sleep a lot in the car, waiting for the instant when that moment, the happening that it is unusual, which for example in this case Iceland, is at 4 in the morning when I begin to shoot a lot, when, you know, kind of like in the summers, it is when the weather begins to act a lot more, much more active. And it's as if you're seeing for the first time nature acting in a different way. So you have a different sense of gravity and a different sense of all the forces. So this is one in which I began to emphasize, to do a series emphasizing that distant horizon, and reveals that infinite sense of space that we can meditate on or contemplate. So I created this Nothing Further Happens, which is 60 millimeter. Oh yes, I haven't mentioned, I shoot with the Bolex, 60 millimeter Bolex, these kinds of works. I'll talk about why the mechanics is important in the co-authorship of the work. But the sound is composed by Ben Frost, and I'll talk about him a little bit longer in a minute. But I began to explore in this the feeling of the sublime. I was very interested in what I was feeling in terms of my kind of almost dissolving into this space, but at the same time having the sense of kind of nothingness. And I'll try to summarize some of the thoughts that I was reading about in relation to the sublime. Immanuel Kant said that the sublime was not so much something, a formal quality of some natural phenomenon, but it was much more a conception, something that happens in the mind and in relation to our experience of limits. In order to clarify the concept of the feeling of the sublime, German philosopher Schopenhauer listed examples of the transition from the beautiful to the most sublime, where the fullest feeling of the sublime was an experience of the immensity of the universe's extent and duration, and that there was a pleasure from the knowledge of the observer's nothingness and oneness with nature. And then the interesting thing about that is that as we are now in our modern times, like the idea of the sublime that was spoken by Lyotard,
Jean-François Lyotard, argues that the sublime expresses the edges of our conceptual powers and reveals the multiplicity and instability of our postmodern world. Which, of course, a lot of you that are dealing with all what's happening in this immense, amazing world of the noosphere, of the internet, of all of the things, of where is it that we are going in this digital world, is equally sublime. As I traverse the world documenting the forces of nature, I hope that the concept of élan vital developed by French philosopher Henri Bergson, who he describes as the explosive internal force that life carries within itself, which he claims animates all beings present in the work. And this is a video that, again, given the time, I won't show it, but you can find it in my website and you can listen to it. The sound is by Ben Frost. It's pretty intense. And it's interesting when you are talking with a composer about sound, because one can be cinematic, or the other one can be much more abstract and much more structural. So I think that that is something that the conversation becomes interesting with the composer. In some places like the Arctic tundra, where I spent long periods of time, I experienced the sensation of being surrounded only by vast horizons in a complete surrender to spatial infinity. This photographic series is called Weatherscapes, which explores the numbing phenomena of light and void, which places us at the edge of these amorphous infinites. In this near-nothingness, all my senses become acclimated to perceive more precisely. And I think that that's what's something that I'm looking all the time to figure out ways in which I stop knowing, so that I can make perhaps the known unknown and experience it for the first time. And therefore my sensory system is much more alert, is much more ready to truly see and perceive. So it's as if what we need to do as artists is to be able to, rather than almost like just try to see much more what's out there, is how do we unlearn, how do we forget what we know, so we truly perceive as if for the first time. So in these photographs, weather, fog, rain, snow, clouds, I'm pretty sure you're very familiar with those right here. For me, they seem like the unknown, unusual thing. Inhabits the otherwise vast abstract space between my body and the distant horizon. I then experience a much more compact environment, creating a continuous and intimate ensemble between my body, the weather, and the landscape. So that's, I don't know if you noticed, but whenever you have the fog, you're in a completely different relationship. It's as if you're in a beautiful cocoon, and that kind of space you have experienced it, I'm sure, like with the James Turrell or those kinds of places or installations that work with light. More of those photographs, and I know I need to speed up, so I'm going to speed up. Never Happened Again is a series focused on the agency of the apparatus as a co-author. When I negotiated with my 60-year-old 16mm Bolex film camera to achieve a sense of change beyond, yeah, I'm starting to forget how to speak English, beyond my control. So the idea that my camera is a co-author, that somehow I cannot control the film, is where I get very, very interested in then how is it that that which I'm using, that which I'm working with, this mediator, is able to actually be my co-author and allow it much more agency. Something that I have a harder time with my SLRs, although I'm trying, and I'll show you just one example of how that works. And the idea also of trial and testing, and I'm going back again, observing and re-observing, and it's something that, do I really understand how these function, how this works? And that goes on, and it's also a loop. Through this mechanism, chance is introduced into the making of the image, resulting in radiant chroma floods, intensified by the irregular flickering of the frames, set against the subject matter of mundane nature. Grass, a field in the park, and a urban eucalyptus tree. A field of cotton flowers where the sheep graze. My interest in issues of perception expand to the perception of light by the apparatus. This work is called Never Happen Again because every time that I would go to nature and try to say, okay, I saw this and I want to go back to film it, it never happens. So these are just frames of that. So Henry Bergson has been most influential in my life and work, and continues to be because of, I don't want to get too much into it, but the idea of constant becoming, the moment, the difference between being and acting, the moment of the change, this act where intuition happens. His whole theory of intuition that he developed fascinates me. But there also is Tarkovsky, his philosophy as much as his cinematography. I don't know if you remember that beautiful opening of Solaris when you have the grass that it moves. I saw that one many years ago, 20-something years ago, and it never will leave me because it was the first thing that completely moved me. And it was the idea that he focuses not so much on that outer space where he's filming, but in the realm of our consciousness. So a lot of this series of works is these kind of observation and looking in the patterns. Move to the next one. Never happened again. I wanted to make a point on this one. This is a frame of a video. You know that many galleries or museums, it is very difficult for them to collect time-based media. They're always looking at ways in which from what you are showing, what artifacts are sellable, what artifacts are there for them to be able to say, well, yes, here's the video, but here is something that also comes out of the video, or whatever it is that it is an artifact. I'm talking to Lita Albuquerque about the same thing. When you do experiences, what is it that remains? So what I do is that from here I take frames of the 16mm, I scan them. Some of the editions are, 60 by 20. Other editions are really large, but those are the prints that come from the 16mm. And then I'm also interested in exploring when is it that the image begins to completely fragment and disappear. But having an idea of how is it that your work can actually exist in other spaces, whether it's a gallery if you're interested in that. But it is, it's the number of galleries that collect time-based media is just so scarce. And museums as well. So Never Happened Can and Ducat, and these are still frames of that one. That's pretty much the scale that it's exhibited. And then this is another one in the same area of glaciers. This was shot in Svalbard, 600 miles from the North Pole. And I think this is here, yeah. And this is one thing that the flickering of the 16mm camera is demonstrative of the mechanisms of the apparatus. So that kind of idea of indexical, that it is something that it can happen with this apparatus only. And again, this cooperative is giving agency to the camera, and I enjoy that. And that is a larger body of work. This is in the Municipal Art Gallery, so sometimes, I have to adapt the shape to be able to feel like there is the immersive space. They have sound, some of these pieces, and don't. And this is how I'm dealing with it with the SLR. The SLR, you need to really trip it with the way that light hits it. So I'm filming lightning, and I'm filming ways in which the light can really kind of shock the camera to reveal its flaws in a way, or its mechanism. So these are some of the frames that might have interesting ways of being able to see how the camera reads that. So the journey as a medium in itself. I consider the journey as a medium in itself, and I have produced large body of works just focusing on this idea of these kind of unfamiliar places and extreme places where, again, I am awakened to perceive more precisely. One of them, specifically when walking is something that I like experiencing, that kind of space, taking my time to be and inhabit those spaces. This is Recurrence Relation, which is an ongoing series of video works where a human figure walks from a distant horizon towards the viewer and beyond. Very mundane. Few things are that mundane. But this project focuses on recurring, and that solitary and unending issue, the recurring and solitary and unending issues of migration. So even if, right now it's so clear that migration of peoples, it's the beginning. And part of it has a lot to do with, it's climate change is displacing so many peoples, and it's going to do it even more. So migration is hand in hand, goes hand in hand with this. So I began this in 2002, and this I call it number 0 because it was not only if it's ephemeral aspects of this, but the film left me with very, very few frames, but also because we, unaware, had entered into a minefield in Bolivia. This is shot in Bolivia, and it was very, during the Augusto Pinochet regime, the dictatorship, Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile were kind of bombing each other constantly, or attacking each other. So there's still a lot of these landmines in there. Even recently, they continue to be tourists and they got blown up. So the idea of Adam coming back from, I'm telling him, "Amor, just go as far as you can." And then Adam is walking back like a fumigated spider, and I just don't know what's happening. And I say, "Amor, can you please do it again?" And he's like, he's sweating. He's like, "We entered a minefield," and I had entered with my truck way into that place. And the only way that we knew is because there was a sign on the ground that had the wind had turned and taken down. So anyway, so that kind of solidified even the series. It had not become a series until then. So we have these various series. I continue to do them everywhere where I can, that I am able to observe this human going through different environments. And this is one in which a group of scientists from a residency I went to, it's called the Arctic Circle, it was in Svalbard, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But I was fascinated at the way in which we, as artists, we as scientists, we begin to migrate not unlike birds. And so this patterning, I began to be interested in recording these groups and this idea of walking. And Michel de Certeau argued that the practice of walking is analogous, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that word, to the speech act. And can only be understood, and can also be understood to create a kind of spacing of syntax in relation of how things are encountered. Walking and travel are described as a form of enunciation that carries a possibility of breathing life, introducing a temporal or narrative. So this idea of being able to inscribe the space for yourself and inscribe the space with your presence, I'm interested in, and I'm making a piece. This piece is an ongoing work in which everywhere I go, where I'm able to film myself, certain distance in the horizon line, I begin to walk the horizon line. And this piece is called Again, Walking the Earth. And I will finish when I am dead. I really want to walk it with my cane at one point and just really trying to see what is it that the traversing of a lifetime and the landscape, as the years that will go by, let's see what landscapes are there. Continuing with this idea of inscribing space, I created the work called El Norte, 2013. And it is in response to a bizarre colonialist action by a Russian member of parliament who in 2007, aboard a mini submarine, descended into the ice-covered sea of the North Pole and extended a robotic arm and planted it at the seafloor underneath the ice cap. And El Norte is a critique of the colonial attitude, and in particular in relation to the current geopolitics of the North Pole. El Norte is a feudal conquest of the North Pole. It is also a work that explores issues of identity, gender in relation to territory, to land ownership and nature. So, I mean, what is a Mexican doing very close to the North Pole, trying to claim territory? So I could not think of anything more futile to do. And so I'm carrying, in this residency and in a dinghy, because for us to get to land, I had to actually go in a little Zodiac with my flag in there. So I arrive and I get to plant my flag. Strangely, that area, there's more polar bears than humans, so obviously I had to be kind of flanked by people with rifles to be able to, in case I would fall in a den, so of a polar bear or something, because it's, it's so remote, and I'll tell you, if you kill a polar bear over there, you go on trial. You do. So here, there is my
It's not that I planned it, oh, I'm going to do this and it's going to go. No, it's like I'm doing this, and because it was a makeshift flag, it does that. And when I turn, and it really is, besides that I look like who killed Kenny, but I'm turning, and I have no idea what to do, and I'm thinking in terms like, what happened? And it was the best thing that could have happened, because I could have not, understanding the fact that conquering is futile, it was given to me, and I had to in that moment think, what's my relationship to my flag? What's my relationship to Mexico? What's my relationship to this symbol? Do I just leave it there? What do I do with it? So for me, it's like the idea of leaving with my flag. I still have in me a very Mexican love for my flag. I mean, I'm so nationalist that it really began to kind of just, it questioned my relationship to my own flag, my country. It was, so I still am continuing to deal with these issues of identity, which is a lot of what my design focuses on. And I know I need to move forward, so this is exhibited. And then at the same time, I'm thinking of, okay, so here is, we inhabit this space, we are this identity. What happens if we pull out and we look from the outside? So I began filming islands, thinking of this sense of entity, this entity, this idea in which I understand its boundaries. I am now beginning to scout it from the outside. So this is also another body of work in which I'm, meditating on the idea of the boundary that divides that which is land and that which is other. And this is a time lapse that I shot from the sailboat in Svalbard, in the archipelago is in the north of the Spitsbergen Island. Svalbard is an archipelago that it is a territory where, I'm forgetting my English, a territory that right now it's administered by Norway. But there are Russian settlements. And I'll move on. This kind of just goes on and moves again. And fieldwork, artistic fieldwork borrows methods from various disciplines, from sociology to fiction writing, and merges the apparent objectivity of science, scientific research, with a subjective, flexible approach, drawing on multiple methodologies and discourses. Artists engage in exploration, surveying the land, surveying the earth, investigating things in the field, and their projects often take the form of atypical archives, presenting the results of their research in the form of books, films, photographs, installations, animations, drawings, text. And that is something that I'm the most excited about, this idea of being able to present your works again in all these different ways, that we're not limited by discipline, but it is, you do what is required, what it is required to be able to tell the story or to investigate something. Robert Smithson notes that there are two types of scientists, the one who has the controlled studio experiment, and then the field scientist, who is working in a sense with an uncontrollable aspect, and that the conflict arises from the perfect isolation as opposed to the chance disruption. The security that comes from working in the lab is very different than the security that comes from working in the studio. So there is a parallel there. The studio and the lab become places where you can control your information. But at the same time, that information that you are controlling is not that interesting. The stability of that is constantly challenged by the instability of those external forces, like, let's say, the weather. So that idea of being able to be so beautifully unstable, so beautifully vulnerable, so that what you do, you're able to then question constantly those schemes or schematics that you have made for yourself, for your life. And that is, in a sense, identity. And here I'm going to go back to Bergson, because that's what Bergson says. Identity, being, is so static. The moment that you identify with anything, you have abandoned the possibility of being able to be someone else and the possibility of being able to be modulated and changed. So on identity, on identifying, like Naomi Klein would say, no logo. That is where I think creativity, intuition, change
newness, the way that we are able to think and speculate of what is new. So I chose to talk about this expedition, and how is my time? Am I complete? Okay, good. I still have at 8:30, right? Or 8:40. As an example of how I carry my artistic practice, and let me take this off, carry my artistic practice, and I want to carry it even more. Thank you. Oh yes, you're right. I do like soccer balls or like no. In 2010, I traveled to Longyearbyen, the largest city on Spitsbergen Island in the international territory of Svalbard Archipelago in the high Arctic, to join a group of international artists, scientists, architects, and educators in an Arctic expedition. 20 artists from around the world, aboard an ice-class sailing vessel, the Norderlicht, sailed the west and north coast of Spitsbergen Island and collaborated on projects inspired by the cold, barren landscape. I'm starting to read like how my husband reads stories. We actually read to our cats like that. My list of equipment, I have children, so I have to read to some. My list of equipment is right here. I just felt that I needed to have a record of what I brought. So you saw there an Atom Minima, which was a rental and a borrowed lens that my friend gave it to me and said, Rebecca, this is worth more than my house. And I'm like, I don't want it. So anyway, the batteries, all those things, my Canon, this is much more my equipment. But this creature, this beast, weighed 60 pounds. So at one point I had to actually ride this haiku, storm back 50 pounds because the other one was a tripod at 10. Brush ice, pancake lunch at noon, diverging in clumps. Because we had delicious pancakes in the boat. But there it shows where we went. We went in the north, we took from Longyearbyen, and then we went all the way up to Muffin Island, exactly in between Tromsø in Norway and the North Pole. And you're not going to believe it. This almost will feel like a montage. The Disneyland montage. Exactly. That's the Norderlicht. This two-masted ice-class sailing vessel that turned 100 years when we were there. And again, we collectively explored these unusual places. We helped each other. It felt like the temperatures of minus 25 degrees where nothing wanted me to live there. And I realized you guys live it almost every winter here. I mean, it's just, I'm such a chicken about kind of weather. Yeah, no, I can't handle that. But definitely, yes. So anyway, this was the environment. And then being in front of, confronted with these conditions where they would tell us when we were moving from the sailboat, if you step towards the dinghy and you fall in the water, you have 6 minutes to live if we leave you in the water, but 3 minutes to live if we take you out, because of the way that the air it's colder and it just freezes all your body. So it's interesting to think of that, the vulnerability, and there's something good. I've been talking about de-identifying. It's like suddenly you de-identify from comfort and that which gives you that safety. Among the several locations, we visited this place that is Ny-Ålesund, which is the northernmost functional public settlement on Earth, above Siberia. North from Ny-Ålesund, you only have a few trappers living there. And these generated a photographic essay in which I wanted to focus on the habitat of migrating scientists. Scientists from Norway, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, France, India, Italy, Japan, North Korea, China come to work in Ny-Ålesund. And some of them stay for months and some of them stay for years, but most of them leave during the winter. So they do not winter there. Most people don't winter there. And they remain for 1 to 2 years and they return again to their respective countries. And again here, the key that I'm very interested in is they journey back and forth dozens of times in the course of their scientific investigations, establishing a periodic migratory pattern not unlike many animals and birds. So
So again, and this expedition, I know that some of you are interested, well, how do I get there, right? And this was one of the coincidences that I applied to a fellowship and to a grant. And I got them both in the same year. And that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. So there was no way that I was not going to do something phenomenal with this. So this one was funded by the California Community Foundation Fellowship, Mid-Career Artist Fellowship. And then simultaneously the City of Los Angeles Award. And with that one I was able to then print these photographs and then exhibited them in their in the Municipal Art Gallery as part of the award they had at this exhibition. So that kind of, how do you call that, carambola in billar, the one that has the two white balls and the red ball, and you go boom.
Billiards.
Billiards, yeah. That happened. That happened. And I began to be very interested in ice. So I started talking to a glaciologist in Iceland, and mainly Iceland. Why Iceland? I just simply love going there. It's a place that it has my heart. So then I will continue to go there. And then I made pieces that, one of them was, the glaciologist, his specialization is ice textures and forms. I mean, that is just the way that they are formed, the way they're organized. So I began reading a lot about that and haven't done much work with that. It's kind of one of the many things I have to juggle with, and I will do. But two pieces I did was, one of them was a mantra, in which this woman's voice, a very monotonous voice, starts reciting ice shelves, ice rises, ice bastions, ice pipes, ice falls, ice falls, ice caps, all the different ways in which we name the ice. And then at the same time also, and again, it's like, for me, it's like this mantra is as if we are meditating on that, which inevitably we are losing. While we were there, Ok, one of the glaciers in Iceland, was demoted to mountain because it lost all of its glacier. And it's not pretty for Langjökull, which is, no, it's not that one, it's the other one. I forgot the name right now. But it is the glacier where Jules Verne set his voyage to the center of the earth. It was exactly on that one. And again, invoking something that we are losing. I also did this laser etching of the prints and all kinds of other ways. There is a book in which all of the glaciers of Iceland are placed. And the one that is in red is Ok. Then this photographic essay was capturing the same expedition, and it's on Barentsburg, a Russian village, and it is mainly about extractionism, the idea of extracting. It is a coal mine, so I'm focusing on the ways in which these villages are formed, that 300 people are living there, and they all are working in the coal mine, or there are families that work there. But because it is such harsh environment, people abandon ship. They just cannot live there. And so all of these buildings are abandoned. This one is abandoned, but it is such incredible brutalist architecture just put there. And this is now the site of the village that it is inhabited. They're starting to, of course, to build different kinds of buildings. But this idea of going somewhere and being able to document how is it that then people live around the mines. And I didn't get to go into the mine this time, but I'm hoping to do that. And then another piece, this is a single channel video. Again, architectural scale. Drushner is the composer, and it's called CircumSolar Migration 3. And it's a contemplation of migratory seabirds captured during their breeding season at Latrabjarg, the westernmost point of Iceland, which is the largest bird cliff in Europe, 14 kilometers long and up to 440 meters high, hosting up to 40% of the world's population of the given species. At any moment, be day or night, there are great bird migrations taking flight. Ornithologists estimate that more than 5 billion birds annually journey across the hemisphere. So think about it, even greater than the complex weather systems, bird migration is the one unifying natural phenomenon in the world.
image is experienced vertically, defamiliarizing the seascape so that the boundary dividing sea and sky becomes unstable. The spatial shift, together with a low video frame rate, furthers the abstraction, so we may understand migration and the migration impetus perhaps as code, a genetic code for evolutionary preservation. With this work, I reflect on how we as human species, we no longer have the understanding of our place within this greater scheme of life. So I look at this bird, and this is like the birds have this clear impetus for feeding, reproducing, evolution, and I guess survival before evolution. And this is exhibited in, again, the larger scale possible, so that you pretty much maybe that scale. So it's meditative, you inhabit the space. One of the things that's been nice of the gallery, Williamson Gallery, is that the director said that, he sometimes will come see the work, stay 5 minutes, 4 minutes, see something. But people came to the work and they brought their lunch and sat there and they spent half an hour with the work. And that was both with the waterfall, with the grass, and with this work. And I think that is a very good thing, that somehow whatever I'm communicating, that it is inviting, that it makes you feel like there's life in this place. Even if it's synthetic, just think about it. I taught a class of what if we are doing colonies, space colonies, what if nature do we bring when we cannot bring a potted plant or a hairy furry creature? So what if when we are recreating this life force with light, which of course is a life force, then how is it that we give it the sensation that actually fulfill what in many ways nature does, or try to do that, or the earthly, the natural world of the earth. So as an immigrant myself, I am interested in issues of migration of both animals and humans. So I continue to work on these kinds of projects. CircumSolar is a long-term project based on the Arctic Tern, a very small seabird that has the longest migration of all living creatures in the world, flying from the Arctic to the Antarctic and back again every year. It experiences 2 polar summers of 24-hour daylight each year, which makes it the creature that sees the most daylight of any creature in the world. And I think just for that it's worth following this beautiful little creature. It's just 4 ounces. It's tiny, wingspan about this big. Here it is. Oh, that one having had sound. I don't know where it went. I should try to imitate it. Oh, the sound wasn't important.
You can kind of hear it.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I have a feeling it might be, I know we're hearing sound, so it's my problem, not the problem here. Oh, the volume is all the way to the top. Okay, anyway. Just something like that. Okay, what did I do? So there is a poem that I don't know, I think I'm not going to get into it, but it just kind of takes you through the whole route, which I will take you maybe in the next one right here. This is a photographic print that is 80 inches tall. And we've spent a lot of summers in the Arctic, in the north of Iceland, trying to document the time of their nesting. And we have been talking to a scientist telling us that 90% of the chicks are dying. She was researching this, and we just cannot believe why is it that they're dying. And it is that the waters around Iceland, they have warmed up by 1 degree, making the sand eel, no, the mackerel, to migrate sooner, eating the sand eel, that it is the only little teeny bird that they can feed the chicks. And so many seabirds are having this problem because as the waters, shift, different, creatures are eating what the habitat used to be there. So one of the things that I was able to do is I was able to document that very thing. There was this little chick and the parents kept bringing the wrong fish. The wrong fish. Kids are picky, right? You would know. So anyway, it's devastating the fact that these, so more and more we want to definitely then make sure that these, this story gets told. So the plan for us is to be able to, this is the migration of the bird. It spends about 80 days up there. In June, no, that's not, yeah, maybe, yeah, 60 days. And then it starts going down. It comes the coast of Africa. Then some of them end up going the whole coast and go to even close to Australia. But others cross into the east coast of Brazil, and then they circumnavigate Antarctica for, again, about feeding on krill. And obviously everything is about feeding and finding the right place to feed. And then they go up past the equator and then take the trade winds to go up again. So it is 88,000 kilometers, about 55,000 miles. Every year it's a solar flight, and they find each other and they mate for life. They find each other back again in the north. And so it's really a beautiful thing. So our idea is that we want to actually catch them in every state and film them. We applied to the National Science Foundation to take us to Antarctica. And unfortunately, the location we need to go is exactly the place that only about 5 scientists get to go every year. So we weren't, they like our project, but we weren't able to go this year. But we'll continue to do it. Maybe I'll go with a little cane to take care of those little birds. So what is the first way in which I presented the CircumSolar project to the world? And it was in this installation that was part of GLOW, and it only focuses on the north, on the nesting part, and the boreal summer, the breeding season, May, June, and July. It's a 16mm video combined with some HD video projected in a 25-feet screen by a total height of 30 feet. And the video is 26 minutes long, and the composer is Ben Frost. And this is installed at GLOW 2013, which is a night arts event that happens every 2-3 years in Santa Monica Beach. We had 130,000 people visit the site. And believe it or not, this is something, sometimes it's like, how much money do you to be able to put this thing? Like, they gave me $15,000, which is a good amount, but at the same time it's nothing. For something that actually of this scale, the first quote I got on this to be able to construct my own structure was about $80,000. And so I started to pull it back, pull it back, pull it back. This is actually the ring that you use in concerts to hang all of the lights for Shakira, right? So I think that is something that you begin to find that which can help you to be able to create this. I wanted it to feel like a sun or a moon, and it's set against the ocean. So again, it's like the idea of focusing on migration. This is, as soon as it opened, it was still the moment where the dusk was happening, and it created like a false transparency that I had no idea, because at one point the Arctic Tern is on the screen projected, but then about 100 pelicans are migrating behind it. So this kind of transparency that happens at that time was quite beautiful. Okay, please play. All right, this had sound, and it goes, just wing. Except, I don't know why that is happening. I lost the sound. Because the last part does have the sound, but I will put. Sound does matter. I don't know what's happening. So here. There is sound. So you saw there a little bit of that transparency. And what I'll do next is I will show you the video itself. And again, it is one that is 26 minutes, but you also can go to recommend
the studio, and it'll be there so you can see the video. All right, might as well. I'm going to move to the next piece because I think it's important to see that. So with the Arctic Tern at its core, the work investigates larger themes relevant to our time, such as the social issue of migration, human and animal, the ecological concern of the Anthropocene climate change, and the geopolitics of the Arctic and the Antarctic. So, side note, because I might end there, I have other projects that are public art, and I don't know if that would actually push your class a little bit too far out, or we could just open to discussion. That would be as well good, because
Maybe try to do a little bit of both. Show us just highlight it. Maybe a highlight of the
Okay, that sounds good.
Well,
and then this piece
I
just
do have
very
to wrap it for half up and we'll run that.
okay, that's good. I just wanted to show this piece because Ben Frost, the Icelandic composer, and I, we exchange works. So I designed his LPs so he can make the sound of my work. So I think that those are the kind of relationships that I always have thought is like collaborate with others, exchange works, work as teams so that you can definitely help each other to be able to do that. So these are just a few. I know that there's some graphic design, people interested in graphic design here. So this is then some of the graphic design that I have done for Ben Frost. And this is the new one called Aurora. Some of you, anybody knows Ben about his sound? All right, so I'll show you a piece right now. All right, so let me go to the video itself that I need to transport into the other world right here. And then I need to go here. What is my mouse? I am lost in a space. This kind of space. I'm totally lost in a space. Okay, got it. Oh, this has to have sound. We tested this one, didn't we? And that sound also, a lot of this is actually the sound that the sun emits, the noises.
That sounds great.
And this one is very light, very sound. There is, of course, a lot of it. Very, very deep frequency. And I will walk it through a little bit because I know that otherwise you only get to see a little bit of the piece. But you're able to see different moments of the eyes. Then she walks. And again, the sound that she walks. And then here is where the protagonist begins to enter. not being able to focus very well on the place of where the bird is. And I think in many ways for me the idea of being able to, like, trying to understand another species, trying to understand another creature, it is so elusive. And what I know it's going to be from, of course, my human-centric point of view, it's inevitable. And then this moves, that was the first time that this piece appeared. Just moves using spaces, but anyway, I think that that's something that if you see it, this was a very, very strange moment that I was able to catch. And mating is not that aggressive. So this one was really about killing each other. Like, yeah, it was fighting for resources, fighting. So there is that. And then you see the third bird comes and pushes the second one so that it releases. So it's very. And again, a lot of these ones, the reverberation that happens is obviously, I mean, the subwoofer to be able to bring that. And then this takes us through different places, like these, for example, even this moment of the moment a parent chooses who to feed. Oh, here. So here is the walking. Maybe I should definitely put this here. Also, there's a change, right? And then just imagine you are just looking at Facebook, right? Another very important influence. And I think this idea of the life, the craziness, the exuberance of the chattering of the jungle, which is where I grew up primarily. My father was an amateur archaeologist, so we lived in the jungle. Some people tell me, why do I go to the Arctic? Because that's more me. That's where that comes from. So this idea of the chattering nature, the chattering. It's funny, all of these have no sound. I understand the ones that come here. But anyway. That. The Counterforce Lab is a research and field studio based in design media arts, dedicated to using art and design to develop new collaborative insights, disciplines, and methods to research, create, and execute projects around ecological impacts of the Anthropocene climate change. So at this stage, that's the focus. Thank you so much. it?
Yeah, he was a philosopher from the 1920s who kind of studied this idea of unlearning movement to use your body and space more properly.
Yeah.
Because he became deathly ill, and then he found out it was because of the way he was interacting with the world around him. So he had to unlearn, or try to unlearn everything, all of his habits that he was using in his life to move better throughout space, and then eventually become a healthier person.
Frederick Alexander. Yeah, no, I don't know him. But I think that anyone that we can actually use as guides to be able to help us undo, unlearn is such a good thing, because you do recognize your body differently. That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Yeah?
You talked about like the apparatus having agency. Why is that important for your work?
You know, coming from Mexico City, I'm from Mexico, what an entropic place, right? I learned, and the jungle, those two. You learn that when you try to control things, I think you create a lot of fear. You create a lot of anxiety because you cannot control nature. You cannot control everything. So many times the idea of finding something that is able to set whatever, and maybe because I have always been a very controlling person. Yeah, I mean, you might get a little bit of this idea of that I was an Olympic gymnast and I was going to go to Moscow. So think about this body, that I can control every single thing to be able to do a flip in the beam, to be able to do all those kinds of things. That control was killing me. So that control where I am now beginning to allow for that, to not control makes me so happy. To not control just truly makes me feel that there is that exuberance of life that otherwise one is most likely choking. So when the apparatus, when the machine is able to just talk to me and act in a way that the unexpected happens, it feels very alive. It is truly about perhaps finding life in machines. It's trying to understand that this idea of the surprise, the wonder, the things that I could not do. Like I could not make as beautiful these floods of light and the way that it stutters. But this machine does that. And all other machines that I try to interact with, I love them when they have a presence, when they show me that their mechanisms have a presence and that they're part of my world, that they're part of the dialogue. I'm not just commanding them. We are in dialogue. And I think that lifting just that is exciting to me. Even if it's obviously totally in my head, right? But what comes out, it is a collaboration, it truly is. So I think that perhaps more collaborations like that will make me even more happy. I have to explore that much more. But right now is a 16mm, my body, that is able to allow me to have that in stability.
I think it's kind of funny that you like Ben Frost music as well as ice so much. But I was wondering about how your audio, if you ever contemplate it being too bleak or maybe dark, almost something that creates anxiety that would possibly push away viewers. I was wondering if you considered other types of audio.
But I think I'm working with two composers, and both of them I'm directing them to the visceral.
Sure.
So I think that to me, the sound of an intestine is pretty like. So to me, it's like it's not so much bleak, but it's visceral.
Sure.
And if visceral freaks out people, that it's not my problem. But I think that the idea of the sounds of, like cicadas, for example, the way that Ben starts with the sound that the recordings of the sound of the sun, I don't know even really why it's called, because it's not the sound of the sun, but it is the vibrations, the magnitude, I don't know how he called it. It's like a day in San Antonio with cicadas. Just so strong. But there are noises that we're not used to because we are so isolated and we are so disconnected with the natural world. So bleakness appears simply with that which is the other. So I think that is something that perhaps the opening oneself to be able to experience the sounds that we're not used to it. And indeed, there is a quality that I'm looking for. It's a visceral quality. Or it's a, for example, when I was filming the ice, the glacial ice, and it was just touching the way that it crackles. It says that if it sounds like fire, it's glacial ice. I mean, that indexical, that specificity, that the bubbles of millennia are cracking. It's very beautiful. So even that will seem bleak, perhaps, for some, but it is about the material itself. And even a lot of the sounds I give them my field recordings, and then of course they work with them. But I'm recording like the grass. I'm recording it low when it is like at the ground and it is very muffled. But then I'm recording the blades as they're going. So that is a very different kind of sound. And then they compose, and with Ben, indeed I love him, but it is because he also knows me so well. So I think he starts working on something, and it's just when I hear his sound, there's like something that moves me deeply. With Drew, I have to work much more rationally with him. With Ben, I'm working viscerally with him. So it's just different kinds of way of working. Yeah.
You talked about like the journey and medium in itself, and I was wondering if you ever had any like reservations when you were doing some of your field work and kind of out in nature with like just like spending your time recording them and like kind of that process, whereas maybe just like experiencing it.
Reservations?
Oh, like yeah, I was wondering if you had any like reservations of like always like recording the work instead of like just being in it. Because you talked about the journey as a medium in itself, and just kind of like the experience.
There are times, we spend a lot of time walking, spend a lot of time waiting, where I know there's no reason to take the camera, so it is truly experiencing the place. I think that I do art, and I do all of this just to the excuse of being there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just not the other way around. I'm very clear of that. So it's just that I need to, at times I bring the lute, and I do something with that. But I remember specifically one time in which it's my last day in Iceland, and we are in a beautiful glacier, and I'm filming just the wall. And we had already kind of like walked quite a bit into the glacier. And so we're waiting and waiting and waiting. And I ran out of everything. There is no more film, there is no more batteries, there's nothing. We're just looking, and literally when that thing filled, the wall calves. And the wave that comes with it, and just tears just start falling because of course the filmmaker says, shit, I don't have this. But the experience of being there is something that I will never forget. So yeah, sometimes what is here, like in our lives, what is in your phone is how much of your life, like 0.00001%. And the rest is in your memory, it's in your heart, it's in your cellular memory. I don't know if that answered anything. Did I answer what you wanted to answer? Okay, thank you. All right. Anything else?
At the start of the talk, you mentioned vibrant matter.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, were you talking to Jane Bennett?
Yeah.
Okay, so I
The
was
hoarders.
Yes. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how that's influenced your practice, and then potentially like other writers that you've fought with in terms of your practice, and I guess new materials and tension.
Yeah. This is interesting. My relationship to if you see, a lot of my work is almost like isolating many things and just focusing on the nature of matter, but not of things. So I'm expanding into that, and I think that the idea, I mean, I always consider, like, for example, amulets, things that have power. In my culture in Mexico, and it's just, we have a saying that if you look too fast to your left, you see your own death sitting on your shoulder. And that is our relationship to past, present, and future. Like, I will be dead, and she's just right here. So I think that this idea of moving and for example, even just all the power that objects hold, the Mayan pyramids, and just thinking that you go into, you touch a lintel, you touch a stela, you touch something, stela. It's like you feel the power. So I've always understood the power of things, but I only began working with them in my artwork very recently. So it is new to me as well. And I think that is a very, very exuberant, very exciting place to be when, as you are considering, that which is animate or inanimate. In our point of view, that even many people don't consider animals to have any agency or any voice. I mean, I think that Diana Fader is amazing about bringing agency to animals and all of her work. So, not that I don't know it, not that I don't live it, not that I don't consider it, it's just that I think for now it's starting to be very interesting in my work. Her theories in terms of, like, or her thoughts in terms of the hoarders, I don't care about that. Yeah, because I hate accumulation of anything. So I think that that is something that to me is like, gives me the creeps, this idea of just hoarding stuff. But I do have a very specific selection of things that I keep almost more as amulet, like tops or something. I have my things. So things do have that vibrancy, that life, that idea that you can have them speak and enter into an equal relationship of being able to contemplate and not always being subordinate. But I am much more, I think that, I'm interested much more in that agency for animals. And I think that that is perhaps for me that's the next thing. Or it's the thing that right now I'm including in filming the birds. I never would have even cared much about filming the Arctic Tern, but it's the favorite bird of my husband. And I go to Iceland with these landscape lenses to be able to just capture. During that time I was just letting the camera run for days and nights and days and nights to be able to just have that, passage of time and aligning certain things of the stars to the earth and how light works. So it's very different what I was into. And suddenly Adam says, "Oh, can you film that bird?" And with a 28 lens or 24 lenses, no, there's no bird. So that is definitely a place that I have grown into. How about you? Who do you recommend?
There's a lot.
Like, we'll talk definitely.
Let's talk.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of, writers that have influenced me a lot. Foucault very much, a lot about control, talk about control, the birth of the clinic, all of those things. That was a time in which I was actually focusing on why am I this control freak, and why am I fighting the systems of power? Why am I constantly battling with, for me even education. The moment that I pose a question to a student saying, "Can you solve it?" It's like, you're my slave, and that really, I don't like that. I'm super Marxist in that sense, and I just definitely don't. And Foucault was very important on trying to understand control. And yet, going back to your question, I'm on Foucault. I am on controlling. And if I will end up like my father, he's right now a complete revolutionary as the older he gets. So it's just, I think that somehow when you get old, when you begin to kind of go on in your life, you almost go back to many things that you were when you were a very young person.
Thank you so much for presenting. I wish we co-sponsored the film, because the film department, because I think that Mike would work really fascinating. Our film program is almost second to none as Matt and our experimental film program. Well, my question is, you started off talking about 9 lines, this changes everything, that immediately sparked my interest. So I'm teaching a course using her book as a central thesis. Can you talk about how her writing influences you, and perhaps with a sense of agency? Obviously, she critiques our complete divorce from nature and the urgency of decade zero and confronting both neoliberalism and climate chaos, and how that influences your art.
Yeah, and this is obviously, as someone that I read No, I read The Shock Doctrine, and now this book of This Changes Everything. Her way of bringing together, in This Changes Everything, for example, the way that she kind of points out is like, it's what we value, and until we change our economic system, there's no way that we are able to stop the momentum in which we are living. So moving of, so many times we've said like we vote with what we buy. We definitely have that power. And what we value is so screwed up. The moment that the earth, the environment is not in the equation of what you consume and what you subscribe to, it's the way that we have set those things so separated. I think it was, Ansel Adams in that, it was Dave Hickey said that Ansel Adams brought Protestantism to nature because he made it so glorious that it separated from the real, that it somehow became God. It became this God thing, and that separation allows us to have no relation to it. So obviously many, many years of that idea that not only this Earth is, what she mentions as extractivism, that we have this is an endless supply of Earth that we can extract. So I think that for me, what she has inspired me very much to not separate my views and my values as a, because I've been in many ways, I have gone to protests about many things, but somehow it's not in my work. And the way that it's now, I think that things are beginning to have to collide. She's helping me collide things. She's helping me bring that what I do cannot remain